Hello, everyone. My name is Candace Elliott, and I am a human resources strategist. And I work with impact-driven leaders to help them thrive with their teams through values-aligned HR practices. So I'm this HR professional working to create thriving work environments, and yet for me, most of my jobs have felt like prisons. And when I think about all the jobs that I've had, they felt like gilded cages that I was trapped in, and there were only a few that I really loved. And one of those was when I was a teacher. And when I was a teacher, I had a lot of autonomy on how my class was taught, and I was really good at it, which helped. And then the other times when I felt that freedom and belonging were when I was an entrepreneur. And I started my first business when I was 23 years old, and it was doing something totally different from what I'm doing now, but it also had that same element of freedom. And then the pandemic happened, and the way that I think about the pandemic, or the way that I've come to think about the pandemic, is that it has brought into the light many things that have been waiting in the darkness and in the shadows. And that the pandemic, in a way, is a gift in that it is bringing all of these things to the surface, and it's giving us a chance to make a choice, to choose to continue doing things the way that we have been doing them, or to choose to do things differently. And the choice to continue with what we have done in our building systems in the workplace previously is really very rooted in systems of oppression and in exploiting the worker to get as much as you can out of them while they're working for you, and to keep as much profit out of the economy as possible, and to limit the upward mobility of the population. And this ends up burning through people. And in particular, in the field of HR recently, the people who've been responsible for many times upholding these systems of disparity, it's been a really tough time. And when I was, thinking about this talk and the pandemic as this leadership crucible that's changing us from the way that we were before, and then the leverage for success, a starting point for me is defining that success. And what does success really look like for me as a CEO of my company, with staff and with clients and with a larger world that's around me? And I went through a very significant restructuring of my business in the early part of this year in order to address the pressures of inflation and also unintentional bias that had made its way into my company. So I don't know if you all have heard about MIT's living wage, but this is an analysis that's done every year, and it's a study of every single county in the United States to come up with what someone needs to make per hour in order to be able to afford their basic living expenses. So this is like housing, food, medical expenses, being able to fix your car, the basic things. And it's different all over the place. And in Santa Cruz, where I live, it a couple years ago was $18 an hour. Then it jumped to $21 an hour. And this year it jumped to $28 an hour. And most of my staff are entry level staff. And so they were in that kind of like 20 to 30 zone. And so this resulted in a lot of shifts around how people are being paid in my company, because I felt that for even my entry-level people, that it wasn't aligned with my values to pay my staff less than what they needed in order for them to be able to afford their basic living expenses. And this isn't like fancy vacations, right? And I do want them to have fancy vacations in the future, and that's definitely on my list of goals for my company, to be able to better compensate my people moving forward. And so when I was preparing for this talk, I was thinking about that shift that my business took earlier this year that was very significant for me and for my staff, and had a lot of changes with how I built and sustained relationships with clients, and the values that guided those decisions. And so the first value is sustainability. And I want for work in my company to be something that is sustainable, not just for me, but also for my employees. I want my employees to feel well compensated for the work that they're doing. And I want to feel that the amount that the company is earning is plenty to be able to support the people who work for me. And when I have extra, I want to give it back instead of keeping it. Personally, I have financial goals, and I don't feel that my financial goals outweigh those of my team, and that they don't outweigh the importance of those of my team. And this sustainability piece doesn't just have to do with the way that I pay my staff, but also with how I am bringing money back into the economy and how I am participating in commerce. So the system that feels good to me is not an exploitive, take as much as you can kind of a system. It is instead a more balanced and sustainable look at how I'm bringing in funds and how I am distributing those funds within my team and within my greater community in order to support that community. So when I look at making investments in my business, I think about who is it that I know that I really want to support and who I believe in the work that they're doing, so that I can bring them abundance. And that is a part of the sustainability system too, because in a system of commerce where we are trading, we're giving and receiving, and we're circulating money and resources among each other, and we are clear and transparent about what is happening with all of those resources, it helps everyone and it lifts everyone up. And another piece of sustainability that I want to share too is that in addition to investing in my business, and I also choose a number of nonprofit organizations to support each year. And a specific one is the Amamutsan Land Trust. So where I live in Santa Cruz is the home, the original unceded land of the Awaswas speaking people. And so I donate a portion of my earnings every month to the Amamutsan Land Trust in order to give back to those where I have benefited from a system of oppression that took their land from them. So the next value that came up during this process that I just went through is the value of equality. And there's a lot that's wrapped up in pay inequality, and one of the things that I help companies with is developing transparent systems of pay. So I could talk about that for hours, but we're going to move on from that topic and talk a bit about unconscious bias. So when I looked at the team that I put together over the past, number of years, I created a very homogenous team. Most of my team are women who are white, who are a similar age to me, with similar backgrounds and educational levels. And it's not like I went out to do that. But I think there is an element of algorithms, because I find a lot of the people that I work with through the internet. And I think that there are algorithms that are trying to match me with people that are like me. And so I had to intentionally go out and try to find people who are different from me. So for me, finding Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people who are non-binary, and finding men who are aligned with my work is an important part of having diversity in my company. Because when our companies represent a diversity of perspectives and life experiences, we're more resilient and we're more able to respond to the changes of the market, and we're more able to reach groups who we wouldn't be able to reach if we're just homogenous. And so this value of equality also became important during this shift. And the last value that I am using in my company to determine success is the value of community. And it's not just me participating in community as a form of commerce or participating in community through my friendships, but also creating and sustaining a community within my own group of staff. And this is a community where I'm not the one that is in control of everything, where I have given over responsibility for major parts of the organization to different people, and where they have strong connections among each other in order to facilitate communication among the team. And in addition to that, I want to instill in my company annual rituals that are a part of this community building, that are part of the onboarding process and the offboarding process and at key moments throughout the year. I also believe that gift giving is an important part of the building of community. And one way to think about annual raises or bonuses is as a gift. And it is a gift that reinforces the importance of a relationship. And it comes from the heart and not from a place of manipulation. And so in implementing these things, it was important for me to know why I was doing what I was doing so that I didn't continue to default to doing something that wasn't actually aligned with my values. Like the example of me hiring a whole bunch of people that look similar to me. This has to do with how we are supporting the well-being of our people, the physical health of our people, the mental health of our people, and what they want to manifest and what they want to bring to the world and their joy and their freedom. And often that's not what HR is. When I hear about HR from business owners or from staff and people like that, it's like it's a 4-letter word. And so where do you start with building this kind of a structure? Because it's not what you learn in CEO school, and it's not what you learn in an MBA, and it's definitely not what I learned in my master's in HR, right? I learned labor law and I learned a little bit about training and development, but I did not learn how to create a holistic and regenerative community for people who work together. So one way to come at this is to just be really clear on what you're doing. Like, what are the things that are most aligned with your mission and your vision, and have a hard look at what belongs and what doesn't. I think about what do I stop doing? What do I keep doing? And what can wait, or what needs a little more time to gestate before it comes to the forward. Because I was spending a lot of time doing things in my business that did not belong in my business. And this may be the case for you, and it may not. And if that's not you, then you can skip to the next part, which is that you document what you're doing so that you have systems in place so that you're not reinventing the wheel all the time. And I help companies document their HR systems so that they can be delegated to someone in the company, and you know that they will always be done using best practices from a values-based approach. That way, if someone leaves, if they get promoted, it's fine. You already have all the systems in place and you can just give them to the next person. The next step after that, or concurrently to that, is finding people and putting them in charge of all of the things, giving them direction and holding them accountable, but giving them lots of freedom to do things the way that they want to do it, the hours that they want to do it, And when you have created a profitable company that is supporting its staff and there is a foundation of trust, then you can look at the kinds of things that you are uniquely positioned as an employer to do to support your people. And those things look different for a lot of companies, but they can look like flexible time off policies, 100% covered medical insurance for the employee and their dependents, retirement savings, health savings, helping people to pay off their student loans, and 6 months of paid parental leave for both birthing employees and partner employees. These are just a few that some of my client companies have implemented. These are the practices and policies that have the best return for your investment, as long as you have the kind of work environment where people are set up to succeed. And this is the great opportunity for change that I see us being presented with in this time during what I hope is the late stages of this pandemic. So now I'm going to take you a little further down the path that I've gone this year. And as with everything that I've said today, I invite you to just take what works for you and to leave the rest. I'm just bringing all of this information forward as an offering for you so that you can work with what is aligned and don't feel like you have to bring into alignment something that does not fit for you. So this has to do a little bit with my interests outside of human resources and my company, Fortress and Flourish. So I'm a ceramic artist and I make wood fire ceramics. I am also an animist and a tarot reader, and I gave birth to my son at home. And through inquiry into these things, and especially into the realm of healing, I came to understand some things about the nervous system that I'm going to share with you. So when you get down to the basics of things, we all come to this earth and we have bodies. And our bodies have nervous systems that generally function in two ways. One way is sympathetic and one way is parasympathetic. And when we are under stress, we are in a sympathetic state. And in the sympathetic state, the blood that is usually in our organs, nourishing our brain, our stomach, and our digestive system, helping us to be able to sort through food and liquids and deciding what to keep and get rid of, and all of our other organs, when we're in this sympathetic state, all of that blood rushes out and it goes into our limbs. And in our limbs, that blood is helping us to have different responses. So fighting, fleeing, freezing, and fawning. And fawning is something that is newer to the conversation, I think. And it is when we avoid speaking our truth in order to not have to talk about the real issue that is at play. And I see this one so much in the workforce. And it is very stressful and taxing on the body to be in the sympathetic state. But that said, the body is built to do this, right? The sympathetic state can be very useful. Like when you hear of someone lifting a car to save a child, this is the body reacting in this way. It can do amazing things. And it's built to go into this state and then to come down from it. But the issue at play in many workplaces is that we are forcing our people to be in this sympathetic state like all the time. We don't give people enough space to be able to transition fully into the parasympathetic state, which is the opposite, which is where people are really resting and they are relaxed and their heart is full and they feel rejuvenated and like wonderful, you know? Like work, when we think of the idea of the workplace, that is not what we think of. We think of the stress and the intensity and the always having to create and to do all the time. And what I've seen is that is not healthy, and it's not good for people to keep doing that all the time. And it shows up in a lot of ways. It shows up as not being able to sleep, as autoimmune disorders, panic attacks, and all other kinds of things. And to just expect that people will be able to forever produce is just unrealistic. Because what happens when you expect that day in and day out and week in and week out, year after year, is that people burn out. And we've seen a lot of this through the pandemic. Like entire professions of people that are just saying, I can't do this anymore. So when the pandemic happened, an interpretation is that people have not been resourced enough in their own bodies to be able to manage the changing nature of the situation. And so we've seen people quitting their jobs. And in addition to that, we get employers, CEOs, leaders, the people in this room, and myself who have been leading through this whole thing and who are like in the same position as everyone else. And if we're not taking the time to rest, if we're not taking the time to resource ourselves and to create space for rest and digesting and the relaxation, then we will burn out. And another sort of lens to look at this through is that of the seasons. So spring, summer, fall, and winter. And when you move into thinking about the seasons and taking time to rest in the different seasons, this helps to bring more of the parasympathetic into the life. So spring is when we're preparing the ground, we're planting our seeds, we're working the soil. In summer, plants are in the fullness of bloom and we're enjoying the beauty of that and basking in it in integration time. Fall is harvest, so sorting, keeping, composting, and burning. And winter is when we rest and we let the ground lie fallow and we allow it to regenerate itself. And so we find ourselves always in spring. It's like in work, it's like spring, 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 spring. We always have to be planting and creating and something new all the time. And so if we make space for these other seasons, we better resource ourselves so that we can be there during the times of struggle. Because the pandemic is like one thing, right? And there are so many other things. I mean, I graduated from college. I went to San Francisco State, and it was in the middle of the recession in 2008. And it was a job market that nobody had seen in decades. And when I started my first business in Florida, it was a tourism business and the BP oil spill happened. So we had a terrible first year. And right now, for many people, the Roe v. Wade being overturned is also an unspeakable hardship. And so that more and more things kind of happen. And if we take the time to rest and be resourced in order to respond, then we will not react. We'll be able to respond and we'll be able to take care of ourselves through the good times and the bad, and we'll be able to take care of our people. And we'll be there fully present to weather the hard times when they inevitably come. And so I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to me today. Again, please take what works for you and leave what doesn't. I think that it's important as someone who is sharing a perspective to invite you to both. You know, I'm not going to say that what I believe and that what's true for me will work for everyone. But if this was meaningful for you, some of the things that I do are create values-aligned HR policies and transparent systems of pay. And I invite you to check out my Instagram. I spend a lot of time there. It's at Fortress and Flourish. The and is spelled out. And then on my website, I have some free resources. One of them is called Do HR Differently, and it guides you through 5 inquiries that you can make that will help you support values aligned practices in your organization. And my website is fortressandflourish.com. Again, that's the and is spelled out, so fortressandflourish.com. And then finally, if this approach is really resonating with you, then I would love to invite you to join me for a little coffee chat. And there are links both on my website and on my Instagram to book a free 30-minute call with me so that we can talk about whatever is on your mind as it relates to the state of the workforce or your own company's HR systems and your goals for your organization. So thank you again for spending this time with me.